What is self? What is the self? It ought to be the easiest answer of all questions. What is the self? In many ways, it's just a different kind of question from who am I? I am myself. What is myself? The self, what is it? If there is a self, this question ought to be super easy to answer. Do you find that question super easy to answer? Let's try and dive into this question. What is the self? In many ways, that was the deepest possible dive into that question. What is the self? The self must be who I am. What is that? Perhaps you expected me to give you an answer to that question. A question that would, or an answer that would satisfy you. Don't you find it a bit odd that we are all saying myself? And if we are confronted with a question, when you say myself, what is that self? Don't you find it odd that we find it difficult to answer that question? Well, some just might say, this is myself. But what do you mean by this is myself? Everybody is talking about myself a lot. We could be very intellectual about it, and we could start to come up with a conceptual explanation. We could say, myself, the self is this human being. But are we limited to this physical appearance? Okay. I will give you an awakened perspective on this question. But mind you, I am only able to use concepts again. And the concepts in and of themselves, they are only descriptive. The concepts are not what they are pointing at. So what is important is what the concepts are pointing at. Well, there are no self. There are not a someone who has a body. There are not a someone who is conscious. There are not a someone who has intelligence. There is not a body that has consciousness. The body is inside consciousness. There is not a body that is experiencing. Consciousness is experiencing. Consciousness is experiencing the body. Consciousness is prior to everything else. If consciousness was to be shut down, turned off, then everything would disappear, evaporate, gone. I am consciousness. I am intelligence. And so are you. I am not special in that sense. Not at all. None of us is special. And we are all special at the same time. But this is consciousness speaking. If I were to describe myself from the bottom up, I would have to start saying, I am consciousness. Consciousness is the foundation of everything. Turn consciousness off and everything disappears. Nothing is. Consciousness is the space in which everything happens. And then if I go one level up, I would say I am intelligence. But the intelligence is a feature of consciousness. This intelligence makes it possible for me, for us, to become self-aware. And that sounds strange, but because there we have this word again, self-aware. So perhaps I should reformulate that. This intelligence makes it possible for consciousness to become aware of consciousness being the foundation of everything. So if I were to raise that one more level, then I would say I am existence. Right now I am existence as this human being, but so are you. There are no difference. So I am consciousness, saturated with intelligence, right now experiencing this human being. Then we can raise it one more time. And then I can say, as this human being, I have a social role that I play in this society. That social role is Hans Christian. But that social role is ever changing. It's just like a mask. And so are yours. There are no selves. You see, the conditioned mind has it all upside down. The conditioned mind creates an idea about a self. Or should I say that the conditioned mind are being conditioned into thinking that it is a self, a someone who has a body, a someone who has intelligence, a someone who has consciousness. But in that way, the conditioned mind is turning everything upside down. And this misunderstanding is the sole cause for so much unnecessary pain and suffering amongst the human beings and all living creatures on this planet. Once the conditioned mind has been indoctrinated into believing that it is a self, then that imagined self feels separated, feels fragmented from the rest of existence. And from that separation, a lot of the motivation that the conditioned mind is fueled by, a lot of the motivation is arising, trying to mend together what to the conditioned mind seems to be broken, what to the conditioned mind seems to be fragmented. But there are no separation in reality. We are consciousness, saturated with intelligence, experiencing a so-called physical existence. An apparent physical existence. There are no self. Or you could say that the social construct is a kind of self, but it is it is simply a role in this big role play that we humans are involved in. So there is no self that can awaken. It cannot happen. Consciousness awakens to itself. In a deeper sense, consciousness has never been asleep, and consciousness does not awaken as such. But through this seemingly physical experience, the intelligence within consciousness can come to realize that all that is going on is itself in numerous forms, coming in and out of existence, but nothing ever really dies. We are that. You are that. And that recognition is only seemingly veiled by all the concepts and all the conditioning, all the habits of the conditioned mind. we are awakening to ourself, which is not a self. I am. You are. We are. This. All of this.